Beattie has been appointed as acting undersecretary for public diplomacy and public affairs. He was fired from the first Trump administration after he attended a white nationalist convention. He's made a lot of inflammatory statements against women and minorities. If he couldn't work for the first Trump administration, how is he qualified to work now?
Margaret, I'm not familiar with Mr. Beattie or the claims that you...
Once upon a time, if you were caught working for the Kremlin, you'd be in handcuffs, not running American foreign policy. But hey, this is the Trump era, and we've got new rules. If you're tired of seeing MAGA media cover up this kind of insanity, hit like and subscribe and help us build a real pushback network. Let's get into this. How did this happen? How does a guy get kicked out of Trump's first administration for white nationalism end up running US foreign policy again? Meet Darren Beattie. In 2018, even the Trump team had to fire him for attending a white nationalist conference. Now he's back running the government's counter-Russia unit. And what does he do first? He shuts it down. Beattie didn't just gut the agency, his entire public history is pro-Kremlin, anti-NATO, and anti-woke culture war stuff. He even posted that Western institutions should be infiltrated by Putin. Here are some of the highlights. A big part of American ruling class hatred of Russia is that Russia is a major power that rejects the woke ideology at the core of American regime. This is written under the Biden administration. Now that China's rejecting America's woke poison in key respects, interesting to see how this plays out into Cold War II. It's not the genocides in China or the controlling of the population that's the issue, nor threatening to invade Taiwan, nor Russia continually invading countries and its neighbours on a regular basis or dropping chemical weapons not once but twice across the UK. It's the fact that they're not woke. And of course, as I mentioned, there's also Taiwan, where he writes, "Taiwan will inevitably belong to China. It's only a matter of time. It's not worth expending any capital to prevent. A visionary statesman will recognise this and make a deal in exchange for acknowledgement of this basic reality. Get some serious concessions on Africa and Antarctica." 2 months before Russia invaded Ukraine for a second time, he wrote this: "Imagine the whining from the globalist American empire if Putin invades Ukraine." And of course, he also wrote this. He wrote, "NATO is a much greater threat to American liberty than Putin ever was." There is even a claim that he wrote in September 2021, "The funny thing is, just about every Western institution would improve in quality if it were directly infiltrated and controlled by Putin." Now, there's something else within the article that's pretty important. Beattie is married to Yulia Kirillov, and her uncle, Sergei Chernikov, is a Russian oligarch, once personally thanked by Putin for bringing him to power. In MAGA world, that's not a red flag, that's a resume booster. Part 2. What's really going on? Is this just sloppy vetting, or is this Trump's team actively stacking the deck for Putin? Let's look back at the history of Trump cozying up to the Kremlin.
There are actually many things we can say about the president-elect and Russia. Many facts, like the fact that Donald Trump has been pursuing a real estate deal in Moscow for decades.
Miss Universe Moscow, November 2013. A trip Donald Trump described as fantastic. President-elect pictured in Moscow with other billionaires, like Russian property developer Aris Algorov. Algorov's son, Emin, is a Russian pop star. Last year, Emin showed me around a Moscow mall the Algorovs constructed, with a replica of Times Square. But Trump's hopes for a Trump Tower Moscow have never gotten off the ground.
I have no dealings with Russia. I have no deals in Russia.
That doesn't mean he hasn't tried. Donald Trump's connection to Moscow traces back as far as 1987. On the 4th of July, Independence Day, Trump was touring Moscow looking at sites for a hotel, including several near Red Square, he says in his book, The Art of the Deal. Later that year, Trump met the then Soviet President Gorbachev in Washington. 9 years later, the Trump Organization told the Moscow Times Trump was heading to Russia again to discuss developing Trump Tower Moscow. Donald Trump's son, Donald Jr., traveled to the city in 2008 to speak at a property conference, according to records of the event. 1 month later, the Trump Organization registered TrumpTowerMoscow.com. Then in 2013, Trump brought the Miss Universe pageant to the Russian capital. Trump Tower Moscow is next, he tweeted. Experts say it would not be unusual for such a high-profile visitor to be the target of Russian intelligence.
The idea is just to collect dirty material about someone and then to leak this material or to blackmail a person and try to put them under control. So this is a very, I would say, traditional thing for the Russian security services to do.
But Donald Trump insists he would never have allowed himself to be compromised.
Donald Trump saying in that news conference he is extremely careful, knowing that there can even be cameras in hotel rooms in Moscow. Meanwhile, a senior US intelligence official telling NBC News that their investigations have not found any conclusive or direct link between Trump and the Russian government.
I think he's done really a great job of outsmarting our country.
Putin even sent me a present, beautiful present.
We just left Moscow. He could not have been nicer. Russia is like, I mean, they're really hot stuff.
He's running this country, and at least he's a leader, you know, unlike what we have in this country.
Yeah, but again, he kills journalists that don't agree with him.
Well, I think our country does plenty of killing also, Joe.
He said Donald Trump is a genius, and he's going to be the leader of the party, and he's going to be the leader of the world. It's not that Putin is smart, which of course he's smart, but the real problem is that our leaders are dumb. Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right. I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
President Trump refusing to blame Russia for election interference.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
Time and again, Trump has repeated Kremlin propaganda, blaming Ukraine for the DNC hack, claiming Ukraine had a server, and calling NATO a bigger threat than Russia. But also, remember this.
But take a look at the war happening right now in Ukraine. It would have never happened if I were president to start off with. And there didn't even have to be a settlement. It wouldn't have happened, period. Russia wouldn't have gone in. I spoke to Putin about it a lot. A deal could have been made. There wouldn't have been one person that died. As far as Russia and Ukraine, if we had a real president, the president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine.
Trump loves to say Putin would never have dared invade Ukraine if he was president, but let's get real. Under Trump, Putin's hit squads used chemical weapons in the UK twice. Something unheard of.
And so this appears to have been a state-sponsored assassination attempt after all. But now, 8 days on, Theresa May came to the Commons.
It is now clear that Mr. Skripal and his daughter were poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia.
If that's what Putin did when Trump was supposedly in charge, what wouldn't he try next? The reality, Putin got away with it, Trump dragged his feet, and the whole world saw the Kremlin testing Western resolve, with Trump barely even raising his voice. Putin didn't get more scared, he got more brazen. And when reports broke that Russia put bounties on US soldiers, Trump called it fake news and did nothing.
Back in June, the world learned that Russia offered cash bounties to the Taliban of as much as $100,000 each for the killing of deployed American troops in Afghanistan. Here's what happened, and here's why it still matters. In February of this year, Donald Trump received a written brief that should have raised the highest alarm. A shadowy arm of Russia's military intelligence, known as Unit 29155, an elite group known for carrying out covert assassinations and sabotage against enemies of Russia, had been making regular payments to a former Afghan drug smuggler named Rahmatullah Azizi. When Afghan intelligence raided one of Azizi's homes in Kabul, they didn't find him. Azizi had fled, likely to Russia. What they did find was $500,000 in cash and documents describing years of Russian payments to the Taliban. The CIA later concluded those payments were meant to reward Taliban-linked fighters for killing American troops. And according to interrogations of captured militants in recent months, this cash incentive directly resulted in the deaths of U.S. service members. U.S. intelligence officers and special operations forces in Afghanistan alerted their superiors about the Russian bounties in January. Trump wasn't briefed until more than a month later, but no action was taken.
This is not an isolated incident. Beattie's role makes perfect sense in an administration that's trying to bring Russia back into the G7, pulled out of Syria allowing Russia to go in, and dragged its feet on sanctions Congress passed against Moscow. What does it mean for the US and the UK? What happens when pro-Kremlin and anti-democracy voices run America's foreign policy? The results are already showing. Ukraine, fighting for its life, now hesitates to trust US intelligence. The only agency tracking Russian and Chinese propaganda is dismantled from within. Staff have been sacked, communications shut down, classified material is now at risk. Meanwhile, Beattie uses his platform to push more Kremlin lines and accuse the West of orchestrating coups. His news site Revolver has campaigned for years against the very agency he now destroys. They used to call it the American Dream, now it's Putin's 5-year plan with Trump as an intern of the month.
Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American Dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
If you're tired of watching democracy get sold for a handful of rubles both in the UK and US, hit that like and subscribe button and let's push back. Because the Kremlin isn't just the gates, it's got a key card for the front door of both Congress and a lot of political parties in the UK. Once again, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of my Patreon and YouTube subscribers. You keep this channel going and growing, and if you'd like to become one, you can click the link in the description. Otherwise, once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.